love beams, and welcome to this episode of To Agile, where we talk all about therapy and trauma and spirituality and how they work together. We are your hosts. I am Crystal,
And I am Charmaine.
and today we're going to talk about emotional intelligence. Charmaine, what you got for me?
Well, emotional intelligence. Now, I have it written down in two different places because I kind of read what was on Google's definition. But then I went back to my group therapy notes because I feel like it's explained in a way that I can better understand it. So, emotional intelligence is the capacity to be aware of, control of, and express one's emotions and to handle interpersonal relationships empathetically. Um, that was really complicated to me. What? So basically, emotional intelligence is being able to perceive and express your emotions, to assimilate emotions with your thoughts, to understand and reason with your emotions, and to regulate your emotions within yourself and for others when they come at you with their strong emotions. So that's kind of what emotional intelligence is all about.
Yeah, absolutely. So, number one, I think the first step into learning how to express yourself properly and have emotional intelligence is to actually understand what emotions are. And there are so many emotions that branch off. There's more than just happy and sad and angry and mad and all of those, the basic ones. There's so much more, but it's so important to actually know what it is that you are feeling, to be able to actually put a name onto that emotion. That's the first step in awareness of emotional intelligence.
Right, right. And emotional responses, you'll know when you're having an emotional response to something because emotional responses are fear, frustration, anger, disgusted, apathetic, guilty, tired, confused, sad, or stressed. All of those are emotional negative responses that people have commonly. And usually having one of those means there's a need that needs to be met. If especially if you start resenting somebody in your life for whatever reason. It might be you have some problems here in emotional intelligence.
Yeah, it's like they're the red flags or the waving the white flag. I need something whenever you feel those emotions. If you feel anger, it's showing you where you need something to change. This is not working for me. Therefore, I feel anger because of it. What can I do to not feel anger from this thing? Well, I need to change this aspect.
It's essentially boundaries that we talked about earlier. This comes back to how we set our boundaries around us. So here's some questions that actually on another slide in my group therapy, that bless my therapist, she put some good stuff up for me. Questions for those unmet needs. Maybe you should be thinking, what do I need when I experience anger, fear, resentment, whatever it is that you're feeling? When I feel that way, what did I need at that moment? And what need is actually not being met there? Is the emotion telling me something about what I need? And then ultimately, what can I do to get this need met in a healthy way? And that's the key right there, the healthy way. Get the need met in a healthy way. But it's really your responsibility to get that need met.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of brings me to getting our needs met and having reactions is triggers. We all have them. We all, have some sort of reaction whenever we have that trigger, and the it's very, very, very important in emotional intelligence to understand that you are the only person that is responsible for your triggers. You are the only person responsible for how you react to those triggers. So, say you are on social media and someone says something that just, mm, that just gets my goat. I just can't stand it. And you just pound out, your response. You are not using emotional intelligence. Charmaine actually has a really, really, really good tool for posting. What is that?
Oh, I love this tool, and I've seen it on social media, so it isn't new, but it's the three gates. Whatever comes out of your mouth, whatever goes onto your computer screen when you're in a high emotion is usually not the best, well thought out response because we're reacting, not actually connecting our brains together and making sense of the situation. So, everything should pass through three gates. And the three gates are: is it true? Is it necessary? And is it kind? And 9 times out of 10, maybe one of those it doesn't pass. Maybe it isn't necessary. Maybe it's definitely not kind. Sometimes it might be just a half truth. And we have to really think about that, though. You know, is it true? Is it kind? Is it necessary? Always let it pass through those three gates before you go posting on social media. Otherwise, you might get a little backlash that you weren't expecting because you were in that triggered moment of emotion.
Yeah, absolutely. And social media is probably, to me, the worst thing to ever happen to emotional intelligence that could have ever happened because don't people have the bravery to say things that they wouldn't normally say to other people, like because other people's emotional intelligence might be they don't have any and their reaction is to slap somebody. Like, you know, things that have
Oh,
happened lately.
yeah. Oops.
Oh, yeah.
I
So,
will
yes.
I will say I still don't condone going to work and getting slapped or attacked by the public. That's still not cool. Not
No.
cool.
No.
But yes, yeah, and that does it all goes back to that emotional intelligence. Are we strong enough to pass that test without letting our emotions get the best of us? And you know what? I've over the course of my life, my emotions have gotten the best of me quite a few times.
Oh, me too.
I'm
Absolutely.
I'm not proud of all of those times, but I'm still here. I made it. I'm alive.
It's a
And
learning experience.
exactly. But it was on, I was trying to tie emotional intelligence to awareness. And it does allow for great deeper awareness if you have emotional intelligence, because if you have that, then the world around you is going to make a lot more sense. You'll, in your mind, will not be reacting to the way somebody spouted something out on your social media spread, when instead you'll think, huh, I wonder where they grew up that they might think that way. Because that right there is showing great emotional intelligence, realizing that, you know what, I might have felt angry by that response, but it didn't necessarily mean that response was true to me. It was true for them. And I can let that go and be a truth for them without having to push my truth onto it.
And so, yeah, it's very important to recognize that people have different perceptions.
Yeah, that
So,
other show that we did.
yes. And that's another part of emotional intelligence is recognizing that people have different experiences than you. Therefore, they have a different perception than you. Therefore, you don't know what those things are. So you're reacting to them and you don't you're showing that you're not emotionally intelligent by having a reaction where you're yelling and screaming and calling them dirty names and making fun of them and judging them or whatever. And so those are all things that show a lack of emotional intelligence.
Yes, they do. So let's go to our thoughts because that kind of stems to our emotional intelligence. Are we actually thinking our thoughts are all true? In talking to people, they'll tell me, oh, well, this is true for me. I don't know how it is for you, but for me, this is the way it's true. And That's just their perception of how that is true for them, because they could look at it at a totally skewed perspective from what they are. They're just so ingrained and set on this particular thought as being true. So, reminding ourselves that our thoughts aren't exactly true, and how we wouldn't bank, say, buying a new vacuum cleaner on whether or not it was 100% accurate. Like maybe it's only 80% accurate. Well, what do I do on the other 20% accurate when it's spitting dirt all over my floor? Like you wouldn't buy a vacuum for that. So, so most people don't notice awareness or emotional intelligence at all, but they notice the lack of it. And then they get really angry about the lacking of awareness, or the lacking of emotional intelligence in whatever situation. But that lack is how we evolve into better people. So instead of focusing on the lack, we should be focusing on trying to overcome that lack ourselves, instead of filling it with alcohol, filling it with uh not communicating my needs effectively. So now they're not getting met. And now I'm just picking fights with my significant other, that type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a tool that I think, or a way of explaining people that you come across that really kind of helps you develop a little bit of emotional intelligence whenever you're coming across people. Um, this is my mirror theory. In spirituality, we believe that everyone is your mirror. We are all one consciousness living in separate bodies to have a human experience. And so therefore everyone that you come across is a mirror for you. I say that there's three, I have a theory that there's three types of mirrors in people. Okay. The first one is that they're going to mirror back to you and show you that's in you that you need to heal. So they could be showing you one of your traumas, and you could be passing judgment on them, not recognizing that you actually have that trauma, and that is the universe showing you that you need to fix this within yourself. And if you keep seeing that same trait and over in every person that you meet, it's trying to show you, hey, look inside of yourself and see what it is that you need to heal. Number two is to show you what you have healed from. It's like, someone will have that trauma trait or that characteristic that you used to have, and now you see it in someone else, and it's showing you that, hey, look how far you have come. Look what you have overcome. This is something that you used to do that you no longer do anymore. And then my third theory is that the next mirror is to show you what you never wish to become. That you could never, do those vile things. That you could never, cheat on your spouse, or you could never, I don't know, like kick a dog. Things like that. They're all of those things. If you can start looking at people and recognizing that they are showing you things, they are reflections, they're showing you, different things, and recognizing what that reflection is trying to show you as well, so.
Yes. I kind of like, oh, I had a thought on just another general overall awareness. Emotional intelligence without awareness is, you're disconnected. You may think you're aware of everything. Sometimes spiritual people come off that way, but then you think, they're a little too sunshiny and happy that I don't think they've done any shadow work. And you know what? That may be true, but they just might not be at that stepping stone yet in their life. And I think that life, it comes at different times. Like I've noticed, like a lot of people in my life that they're struggling with their life at the moment. Whatever's going on in their life, they're lacking of something, and it's really causing them to struggle and become depressed or sad or whatever. And it's been a few people within my circle. And so, it's caused me to reflect now at how I can see they're in stormy waters where I'm in the ebb and flow of life. My life has become this ebb and flow of me being happy and okay and mediocre at best to, oh, here's some sad things that are dredged up, but I'm going to come back from those sad things in just a minute. But I'm not in crashing wavy waters that are being splashed everywhere and tossing my ship around. I'm just kind of floating along right now, which is great. But it doesn't negate the fact that I sailed through those stormy waters myself and I got myself here. And that's part of it too, is that everybody has their rough seas that they're hitting, and they're hitting it at different times you are. You might be floating right on by them, or they're just barely not drowning. We have to
Right.
be cautious of that. Part of being emotionally intelligent is being empathetic to other people, that the fact that they might be having a tumultuous time. I don't even think that's a word. I know I was going for a word, but I don't think it came out right. And some of us might not, that our experience might be a little different at that time. And that goes to say for the people that go, you know, when I was a kid, stuff was like this, or life was like this, or the man was this way. But that was a time of life at one point in time, but that time has long since sailed. That has passed, and life is totally different for kids now. And me telling my kids that me growing up this way, and why aren't you behaving the way I did, because I raised you the way well, just because I raised them the way that I grew up doesn't mean that they came with the experiences that I had. They develop their own experiences with the way that I raise them. So I have to take all that into account. This time is so different than what it used to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, and then also people from trauma usually have that the buck stops with me, and they have a different way of raising their children even. But that brings me, I'm so glad we got here because, it's really, really, really important for the adult to have the emotional intelligence and then teach the emotional intelligence to the child. We
Yes.
are not, as a society, teaching emotional intelligence to children. We're putting our emphasis on academics. Like, my kids know that I don't care what their grades are. As long as you pass school and can move on, like, I am not going to lose my mind over you not having straight A's. And it just makes things so much easier. I also, whenever my kids are, obviously distressed or crying or angry or any of those things, I am like, okay, let's figure out why we are having this reaction. Can you tell me? Can you explain it to me? I'm really, really, I really want my children to have emotional intelligence, and they really do. I mean, far more emotional intelligence than I had because, I wasn't allowed to express myself except for to my mother. And
Mhm.
so, it's very important. I cannot stress enough how important it is to start with emotional intelligence with your children. Like, they
It,
have got to learn it. It's
it
so
is
important.
very easy to just assume that our children have already learned emotional intelligence, or it's something that they picked up in school, or, it took me a minute to realize the lack of emotional intelligence I had taught my kids up to a certain point, that I realized what emotional intelligence actually was. And that awareness right there is so huge. And just like you said, as parents, it is our job to make sure that they understand what emotional intelligence was. I literally was not taught how to deal with my emotions. But my parents did assume I learned how to deal with my emotions the way that I handled myself. I handled myself the way that allowed me to survive. Well, that eventually comes apart at the seams at some point, and I had to relearn how to survive, because the skills that I learned in faking it until I made it didn't actually work. I needed real skills to teach me emotional intelligence. And then once I learned it, I was able then to, and I won't say that all of my kids have learned it to a T. I still see my unemotional or my unemotionally intelligent self spill out of their mouths every once in a while, because they'll say something and I'll go, "Oh, that was me. I did that to them. Oh, I'm sorry, children." But you know what? You do better when you learn better. And I learned better. And now I'm better able to just sit and listen to them when they need to emotionally vent, before I start asking the questions like, well, what do you think you need to do to fix that? Or do you think there's something you can do? And they might have already thought of things and filled it in themselves, which I find fantastic. I might have done a little bit right.
Right. And then, like, I mean, like another important point in emotional intelligence, something that's been really, really bad for it. One, the military isn't great for emotional intelligence because, you have that mission that you have to have done that you've talked about many times.
Right.
But we as a society have taught people to box up their emotions. You don't, I mean, putting it in a box is the best metaphor that I can think of that everybody knows, but and like you can't feel that way right now. So I'm going to box it up and I'm going to put it away. And then I'm probably going to forget about it and not have dealt with it. And it's going to be there. And I'm going to have all of these boxes in my attic. Eventually the attic's going to catch on fire.
Eventually, we've got a hoarding situation.
Because that's trapping those emotions in your body. And we've talked about that many times, that you have got to release it. And I think that that's another important part of emotional intelligence, is knowing that you can't keep all of that trapped in your body, because it does, if you don't let it out, it has nowhere to go.
Right. And you can't, this is something that has to be done purposefully with intention. You can't just be like, oh, well, I had a flashback yesterday and that was my deliberate reflection. No, because it was a flashback. That means it was an intrusive thought, and intrusive thoughts don't count as deliberate rumination. That means usually you've been overtaken by your emotion and triggered highly and had to step back or whatever. And that isn't a bad thing. It is just you realizing that you have that trigger there. Being able to sit with that emotion and not judge it for what it is, and be okay in that moment, and then let that go and let it process as a past event, instead of you just reliving it over and over again as it a new memory. And that skill is really just mindfulness. Mindfulness is, number one, intentional. You're intentionally being mindful and present in a moment. And two, you're being non judgmental about what's going on. That is so important, because we tend to, as humans, judge everything that comes across. Now, I ran into an emotional bout this weekend while I was cleaning my closet. And when that emotion hit me, instead of going, oh my God, I don't want to feel this emotion, and packing it tight into a little box and setting it back up on the shelf behind things again so I forget about it, I went ahead and sat with the emotion, all the good stuff that came with it and all the bad stuff that came with it. And I held it, while I sat and cried in my closet for a little bit, which is kind of ironic because that's where I always went to cry as a child. It's where I went to cry as a young adult in my marriage when I was sad and had to hide from the kids. It was in my closet. So I found kind of ironic that I was once again sitting in my closet and crying, but this time because I was really grieving all that I had lost along the way. and being grateful for where I am now, because where I am now is in a place where I made it. I came out whole instead of these broken, shattered pieces that were just kind of scar tissue together. Now I feel like I'm more of a beautiful Japanese cup.
All right. Yeah. And mindfulness, you're right, is so important. It's like the number one skill for emotional intelligence. And it's so there's like this point where you recognize that Crystal is the ego, and Crystal is the one that is experiencing all of these things, right? And it's the observer or the higher self that notices what's happening, right? So take a step back whenever you're having an emotional reaction and say, who's upset? Why are who is actually upset? Well, it's Crystal that is upset. Why is Crystal upset? She's upset because this thing happened. Okay, but who's noticing that she's upset? And that is the observer. Well, is the observer upset? No, the observer is observing. So that's that was something that was in this book that I read, and it just made me go, ah, yeah, I'm here as the observer put into this physical body to have an experience. And I am having experience because everything that you do, every emotion you experience, every physical thing that you experience, all of that is part of being human. And it's really important to take a step back and say, okay, I'm recognizing that this experience is happening. And if you can separate it and say, okay, I'm here, and yet I am also there. Because I don't know, it's hard to explain the
Well,
way
what
I see it in my head.
you're explaining a really great skill in therapy that is called name it to tame it, and that is telling yourself that you are feeling a way. I am feeling angry. I am feeling sad. And in turn, removing it from you and then deciding, why is it that I'm feeling that way? What is the unmet need? Can I get it met myself? Do I need to set a boundary? It's like allowing yourself to bring that thinking part of your brain online instead of your amygdala yelling, danger, danger, fire, fire, you know?
Right. It is literally just taking a step backwards, or even looking down at the situation from a higher point. Really, I mean, it's mindfulness.
Yeah,
It's a part of it.
they used to teach you, well, at least they used to teach me when I was quite young, that if you were feeling a certain way, stop and count to 10 or stop and take 3 breaths. And those are also techniques that bring you essentially to a mindfulness moment where you focus, number 1, I'm just breathing for at least 3 breaths. You know how long it's gonna take, but you can take a moment to pull yourself back into your body and ask yourself, "What's really going on both within me and on the outside of me?" Because sometimes somebody's gonna come at you and they're gonna be angry, and you're gonna wanna react and respond back to it quick, decisive, and like, "Nobody fucks with me." But that may be not what's needed at that moment. You might need to assess the whole situation. And if you've had trauma of some kind, usually you need to take that step back to assess the situation properly. You need that moment. You need to count to 10, or you need that moment to take 3 breaths. But that's what those types of things are designed to help you step into that mindfulness, to allow your prefrontal cortex to come online and make a wise choice.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad that you had a name for that because it's just not, I mean, like, obviously I've never had traditional therapy. I had
Right, right.
a spiritual counselor, that I trust very, very, very deeply. But it's, my skill set comes from learning it in the spiritual realm. I'm so glad
Right.
that you have had the
Yeah, exactly. Well, that was the whole point of us doing this
I know it
too,
was.
was because you would be like, I'm doing this with my spiritual advisor. I'd be like, oh, that's a CBT skill and tell you
Exactly.
what it
It's perfect.
was.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's
But
just,
yeah, all of it is based in sound knowledge and sound studies, real studies that are out there that have been done. I had jotted down a note about mindfulness, and where is it? It was, it must be at the end. The impact that mindfulness has on the brain is that it decreases the activity in the overactive parts of your brain and restores connections to the parts that should be working. So, mindfulness actually takes you out of that place of heightened, oh my God, there's a fire, to the place where you can go,
I'm the
oh,
observer.
there's toast in the toaster and it's burning right now. That's not fire. That is exactly it. That's that observer. You're taking that scientific view of your life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. One of the best tools for mindfulness is meditation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Hands down meditation. And, I mean, like meditation is all about the breath work. And as a matter of fact, it was a lot, another mentor of mine had said it, and I wrote it down as the very first line in my new journal. Always come back to your breath. If you like, for everything. So if you like, you were just reminded me when you were talking about it earlier about
Mm-hmm.
taking 3 breaths. Yes, always come back to your breath. If you can just close your eyes for 5 minutes and do nothing but concentrate on breathing, you there's been studies done on this as well, where you can literally take your stress response and just completely relax your entire body from just closing your eyes and breathing for a few minutes.
Yep. My Tai Chi instructor says, I think it's 3 minutes. 3 minutes of breath will change your whole day, your whole body demeanor, everything, because you're allowing I mean, think about it, how much your body needs oxygen to survive. And then think about how when you get stressed out and your breath gets shortened, what happens to well, I can't even say that word, but what happens to your body? We won't even go there. Charmaine's not going to try. But what happens is your body is starting to produce cortisol because it's not getting enough oxygen because you've now shortened your breath. Breath is so important to providing enough oxygen for your brain to even think correctly. So if you're constantly going into this stress state of shortness of breath, think about that, what that does to your body and how much of the toxins you're actually putting into your body because you're not taking a deeper breath when you do need to be taking those deep breaths. It's so it's so bizarre to think of how much stress I've put on my own self just for not breathing when I should be breathing.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, you also, we talk about stuff being trapped in your body all the time. And your breath is the best modality for moving energy out of your body, trapped energy. So just breathing into a certain space. Maybe you need to breathe into your heart space. Maybe you need to breathe into your womb space. Maybe you need to breathe into your third eye. Maybe you need to breathe into your crown chakra. I mean, like, example, maybe you have some, trapped energy in your ankle and you need to breathe into it. It's just, your breath itself is the most powerful connection. It's how we take in energy. For one, we take in energy from the sun through our skin. We take in energy through the oxygen that we breathe. And so it's very important to really have that good breath control. I mean, like the yoga is the breath. That's from my
Mhm.
yoga instructor.
Yep, it
The
is.
entirety of yoga is the breath. You are not doing yoga unless you're breathing right.
Exactly. And they tell you to focus first and foremost on your breathing and not the motion that they want you to be in, because
Right,
that's inconsequential at that moment. That
right.
breath is the most important first, and then getting into the poses as they get more and more technical or they take more and more skill to master. But that's the thing, it's a practice, and practicing dropping back into that breath. I have found that I've come a long way from the day that they first told me I needed to do meditation to get better. Because they tell you that a lot in therapy. And I remember in the beginning going, "Ah, it was so hard to do. I could only do guided meditations. So I'd have to look up something guided on YouTube. Because if it wasn't guided, I couldn't do it on my own. Now I can sit with just spiritual music playing or a certain megahertz tone playing in the background, and I can drop into that space rather quickly, back to my breath, back into the present. And I don't know when that switch hit. I have no idea. It just kind of happened one day. Thought it, I could, I thought I was struggling with it. And then all of a sudden, one day it was just so easy to do.
Right, absolutely. There are thousands upon thousands of meditation videos on YouTube. And I highly, 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 highly recommend looking for breathing meditations to start you out with, and to look for one that's 5 to 10 minutes and no longer than that. Because I mean, a lot of the times, you're going to have intrusive thoughts come in. That's just kind of part of it until your brain relearns how to not have those intrusive thoughts. And even my spiritual counselor has even said in 20 years of meditating that she still has intrusive thoughts come in. It's just part of it. And that, sometimes that's what needs to come up to be processed and to be let go of. But it's very important to always come back to the breath.
Yeah.
If you find yourself wandering away, breathe. So I highly recommend looking for specifically breathing meditations.
Yes. And I would say for my recommendation when it comes to meditations, and for me, it was very powerful and changed my mindset on meditation and the reason I was doing all the breath work. And that was a loving kindness meditation. And there are hundreds of them on YouTube, long ones and short ones. You can find one, I think, around probably 12 to 15 minutes long at the shortest, sometimes a 5-minute loving kindness meditation. But that in itself, extending not only loving kindness to the people that are important to you, but the people that you struggle with, as well as your own self, those things are so highly impactful when you're learning to meditate, because it really takes you out of the I'm all alone in my trauma to I am connected to the people around me.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. The next thing that's really, really important for meditations is finding a meditator's voice that doesn't take you out of it, because what works for you may not work for me. Somebody might have like a really deep slow cadence, and that just puts you to sleep, and well, you don't want to go to sleep. Or maybe someone's voice is a little too high pitched for you. You just kind of got to find that voice that really just is relaxing and doesn't take away from what you're trying to achieve.
Exactly. I have to go with the British folk. Somebody's gotta have a nice accent and a drippy language that I just love to listen to. So, I'm a big fan of Jason Stevenson and, Michael Seeley on, YouTube for their nighttime meditations, because they do make me fall asleep, but and what they're doing is trying to help you program yourself as you do fall asleep. So they're really speaking to your subconscious as you're drifting off to sleep. And I think that's what I like the most about those particular meditations. But yeah, if I try to listen to it during the day, forget it. I'm going to sleep.
The one I think it's Nikki Sutton. She's got a really sweet, soft spoken voice for meditation. If you like females, it's a good one.
Emotional intelligence. Get some. We all need it. No, I think the most important thing to know about emotional intelligence is if you don't feel like you are necessarily strong in this suit, it isn't something that we are innately born with. It is something that can be learned, though. And it's just a product of making some small changes. But most of us have to be willing to make those changes in order to open up our mind to this type of thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like my the biggest takeaway is just, just stop and think. That's probably the most important part is just stop and think and to be mindful
Mhm.
because you have to take into consideration that the person that you're having the issue with, or maybe it's yourself, but you have got to take into consideration the experiences that person has had, the perception that that person has, the trauma that that person could have had that you don't know anything about. It's just it's easier to just, whoa, let's slow down, let's take a breath, and let's think.
Yep. What need? What need is has got me emotionally triggered right now that I might need to look at? Maybe if I'm being triggered by somebody doing something a little neglectful towards me, like, maybe it isn't that, uh, they're trying to neglect me. Maybe it is my perception based on my life experiences that is making me feel neglect. Maybe it isn't them at all. Maybe it is all about me. And how do I get that feeling of not being neglected from myself without putting it on somebody else to make me feel not neglected?
Yeah, recognize that the person standing in front of you is your mirror. Don't forget
Mhm.
that. Don't forget that everyone has something to show you, and that it is just, everyone that you come across. If you are standing in front if say you're a cashier and you have someone come through your line that is just belligerent, there is nothing that you have done to make that person that way. They're having a bad day for some unknown reason, but they are there to show you something. And if
Mhm.
you are capable of, maybe it's a test, maybe it's a test to make sure that you're capable of being able to have that confrontation and not have an emotional reaction because of it,
Mhm.
understanding that they have a different perception and they had a different experience and it has nothing to do with you.
And
It's just
then
one
being
example.
able yeah, and then being able to let that go and not keep dwelling on that incident again and again later, like coming back to it and why did that make me feel this? Why did that person do that? Why? If you can let that experience go and not carry with you into the next thing that happens to you so that you blow up extra at the next person that goes off. That's kind of what happens. And society has taught not only a lot of us to bottle up those things, to shove them under the rug, to pack them away in little boxes. That's what society teaches us to do, and that's kind of that unlearning process that we have to go through in order to make sense of our lives now that we're an adult. And I wanted to add something else. I can't remember what it was that you were saying, but if you look at every person, every individual that comes at you, even if they make you angry, as just a child themselves, because we're all just children trapped in now adult bodies, it's a lot harder to be angry at them for coming at you at a way because you know what? They're not mind readers and we're not mind readers either. And we just have to remind ourselves that, you know what? We aren't mind readers and we aren't going to be able to judge everybody's behavior against them. But what we can do is be empathetic to them and not be angry at them for having a viewpoint that is different than yours.
Right. Well, how about like, another part, I don't know if we ever actually hit on it very much, was that, also recognizing another part of emotional intelligence is recognizing the emotions of other people, being aware of, things that you are either doing to them that are hurting them, or things that are surrounding them that are hurting them as well. That it's not just about emotional intelligence, isn't just about being aware of yourself, it's also being aware of the emotions of others.
Yep, yep. And in a healthy way, not the overactive way of fawning. That is not good.
Let's not do that. Don't start
People
people pleasing.
pleasing, people pleasing is always bad. What you should be asking yourself though is, what is going to please me in this situation? What is going to appease me? Me. I mean, it is terrible to be like thinking of me all the time. But in essence, that's kind of what you need to do, because it's up to you to get your needs met. You can't expect somebody else to meet your needs for you, because that is codependency. You don't want to be there. So you always have to make sure that you have a means to get the needs that you need met yourself. And I think once you get into that boat, it feels a lot more comfortable, but it's a hard boat to get into when you've been codependent all your life, based on really not being properly taught emotional independence. Because that's like scary when you're all of a sudden afraid in the big bad world, and you don't know what to do because you didn't learn that part, the emotional intelligence part, where, okay, I might be feeling fear. That means there's something that I need to overcome. What is it?
Right. And like fear in and of itself is the cause of the majority of your negative, in quotes, your, because I don't really believe in positive and negative being emotions. There are just emotions, that they're
Mhm.
all emotions are trying to give you a clue as to what it is that is going on with you.
Yep,
And whether you're in a good situation or you're in a bad situation for yourself, because again, perception, what is good for me may not be good for you, and vice versa.
exactly. All right. Well, let's see. I think we had a great discussion on awareness, because I didn't know how this was, or awareness, emotional intelligence. I think we had a great discussion on emotional intelligence. Because I had no idea where this conversation was going to go.
Right.
But I
Because I
feel
mean,
like,
there's so much to it too, right?
mhm,
Like, honestly, there's way more than what we've touched on.
right.
Those are just, I mean, like, and that's
This
what
is
this
just
podcast is
kind of,
about. It's the
yeah,
basics, getting you
it's the
started.
basics. Absolutely the basics. I'm not exactly sure where we should go next.
I don't either.
Like, there was a point in our conversation where we brought up like something else that is equally important. I'll have to, when I'm reviewing, I'll probably find it and be like, ah, there's that little nugget. That's what our
Or
next show.
we could probably do like a whole thing on meditation even. There's a lot
Right.
to it.
I think we should go maybe into mindfulness skills, like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
meditation,
Perfect.
different types of because there's a lot of different types of meditation. There's
Yeah.
guided imagery, there's muscle relaxation. So meditation's probably a good one to go to give people a taste, other than the ones that we mentioned here.
Yeah, mindfulness skills. I like it.
Okay, let me write that down so I don't forget. Mindfulness skills. As for, uh, oh, hello, Toddy. As for, what are we doing? As for emotional intelligence, I feel like we talked a lot about what it is and kind of how we get caught up in it. I think we did a good job of talking about it. And of course, anybody listening, we take feedback. Provide us with what you would like added, or maybe if there's some other topic that ties in that you want us to talk about, bring it up, pop it in the forum, or email us.
Yeah. All right. You can find us at towhichisle.com. You can find our podcast on pretty much any podcast medium. We've got the video podcast up on YouTube, and you can find our emails on the website on the About page.
Yes. And of course, if anything didn't sit with you right today, or something we said fired you up, made you feel away, take what resonates with you and just leave the rest behind.
Because that's what it's all about.
That is, we're just offering another viewpoint on both the spirituality side and the mental health side, and how it kind of does work together. Like, I
Yeah.
see it more and more now, doesn't it?
Whenever I don't have an accurate description, like I can't put a name to this. It's just a skill I have developed, and you're like, oh, well, you're doing this.
Oh,
Hey.
well, that's this skill and this therapy.
There you go. This is why it's so, and I think it's fun. And we really are. We're learning together at the same time as teaching each other.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty fun.
Uh-huh.
As
Because
well
you
as
know what I
learning
say?
and teaching with everyone watching.
That's right. That is our hope. That is our hope, that this reaches you when you need it.
Yeah, exactly. That's the entire intention behind this podcast, is that we believe we have, the conversations that we have had and are having would be beneficial for other people to hear.
Yep.
Yay.
So I guess that is it for us today. To Which Isle is going to sign out, wishing everybody light and love.
Bye, everyone.